Preliminary numbers for Tuesday's box office are out for Shazam, and it is reported that Shazam will get $3,205,000, and that brings its total US domestic box office to $99,529,739. The projected money for Monday was revised down by only $7,000, so their projections were pretty much spot on there, and their Tuesday figure here is about $50,000 off what I suggested that it will probably get, so pretty close to the 50% increase I thought they'll get. It's got 53% here, so fairly accurate, and that means that for the week nothing much will change from my previous video, so it'll get somewhere just under $34 million for week number 2, and it should end up with just under $104 million for the entire total at the end of week number 2. And if we look at our chart with some films with very similar opening weekends, we have Ant-Man, X-Men, X-Men First Class, The Wolverine, and Shazam. And you can just see the purple line there for Shazam. It is slightly under the Wolverine, so it is still last. The Shazam box office is still last out of these films, but as I said, I think it'll be pretty much dead on the Wolverine until the week is ended. And then on Good Friday, it should take a fairly good lead over the top of the Wolverine. On just the chart with the Wolverine and Shazam on it, you can see maybe a little bit closer there that the red line is under the blue, but it is still really, really, really close. So at this stage in time, the Wolverine's US domestic box office and Shazam's domestic box office, very, 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 very similar. And again, I don't think that'll change for the Wednesday or the Thursday totals, but after that, on the Friday coming up, that's when I think Shazam will take quite a substantial lead. On the raw numbers here, we have Shazam on the left and the Wolverine on the right. You can see the April 16th number there is in green. That means that is their official quote-unquote projected number, $3.205 million. And we can see the equivalent day for the Wolverine was only $2.8 million, so about $400,000 there that Shazam has sort of gained on it, and we can see the total gross for Shazam is now $99.5 million, and that is compared to the $100.2 million that the Wolverine had at this point in time, so they're very, very, very close in there. Now, for Wednesday, I said that Wednesday will probably get something very similar to the Monday totals, but a little bit under it, so the Monday totals were basically $2.1 million for Shazam, so somewhere under $2.1 million, probably about $2 million, maybe 1.9. If we look at the equivalent date for the Wolverine, it's got 1.97. So I think the Wolverine figure will be higher than Shazam, but maybe by less than $100,000, but it'll be a little bit higher. Now, on the Thursday, ordinarily I would say that it'll be a similar story again. The Wolverine will probably have a little bit more money than Shazam, but this Thursday has Good Friday after it, which means you get a little bit of a boost of the number of people willing to watch movies on Thursday night, because they obviously won't be working the next day, and so we'll probably get somewhere in the neighborhood of about 10% more than what we get on the Monday. So for the Monday, we got $2.1 million. We'll probably get something like $2.3 million. And at that point in time, it'll have around about $104 million for Shazam, and we can see the Wolverine has $103.9 million. So they'll be pretty much close on whether one is in front of the other one. It's really hard to tell, but it'll be a couple of $100,000 in it probably if they're not in a dead heat. So they're basically on the same amount then. But the day after that, on the Good Friday, as I said in my previous video, it'll probably get somewhere above $5.7 million for Shazam, and we've only got $2.4 million for the Wolverine. So at that point in time, it should take a substantial lead. Even if my 5.7 projection is grossly out, it would be hard to think I'm like 50% out. So it should really get more than $2.4 million no matter what. So it'd be difficult to think that it wouldn't. Now, one reason it perhaps won't get a lot of money is because people may not want to go to the movies the week before Endgame is out. If a lot of people are going to see Endgame the next week, very few people will see a movie 1 week after another week where they have seen a movie, or if they're planning to see a movie, they'll very rarely see one the week before. So it's possible there may be some sort of drastic reduction in the number of people that actually see movies on the week before Endgame. But I don't think it'll really affect things too much because, strictly speaking, there's basically no one going to the movies right now anyway. Okay, if you look at the total box office proceeds for the entire week for every single film, it's really, really low right now. There's not really any film that's a big sort of hit, and there's not a second film that's kind of a hit. You've got Shazam, which I think in the early days, it was really thought that Hellboy would be the number one film at this point in time. Okay, before its reviews came out and the film's obviously bombed. But I don't think too many people thought that Shazam would be the number one film right now in its actual run. So I think, not saying they didn't expect it to get the kind of money it's getting right now, but that something would be earning more money than it, and there isn't. So there's really nothing really big on at the moment. So the total box office is already pretty bad in the couple of weeks running up to Endgame. So if we look at the film after the Wolverine, which I've got here, we've got X-Men First Class. This is where Shazam lines up on a chart with just these two on it. It is a bit behind, but as I said, it will get a nice boost on the Easter Friday, on the Good Friday. And I think at that stage, after that weekend, its third weekend, it should be very close to roughly what X-Men First Class was on, which was about $120 million. So I think Shazam will be getting very close to that total, and if it is, it'll have a really good chance of overtaking X-Men First Class and earning more money than it got in the US domestic box office. On the international numbers, we've got an estimated figure right now of $163.9 million for the international box office for Shazam. That's effectively for the two weekends and for a week. So that's probably not the Monday or the Tuesday numbers in that. But from the figures we have, it looks like it's slowing down a little bit quicker than the US box office is, which isn't an indication that it is slowing down. It's because the reporting can be difficult to get. So it is hard to really say that this is actually slowing down, but the figures say it is right now. But again, it can be because the figures, they just kind of come in all over the place. It's very difficult to really gauge what day they're from and if they're missing out on a few numbers. But if we just look at China, China is slowing down quicker than the US, which is not abnormal, but that is actually what's happening. So the ratio between how much money is earned domestically to internationally is switching a bit more towards the sort of domestic market, sort of percentage-wise, if you like. So, for example, the domestic market had $56 million at the end of the opening weekend, whereas we had $102 million internationally. But now we've increased the $56 million to $99 million, but we've only increased the $102 million to $163 million. So there's a fair gap there between the ratios that happened after the opening weekend. But again, the international numbers won't be as up-to-date as these domestic numbers, so it's not exactly a fair comparison, but it does give us an idea that the international numbers are not doing what Aquaman did. For example, Aquaman earned a very nice amount of money internationally compared to domestically. This one is not quite getting anything like that. It's getting something more in line with roughly 1/3 the money domestically and roughly 2/3 internationally, okay? And that's what it'll probably get when more numbers come in. I had a video I think I put out there after the Friday box office numbers were there for Shazam, and I said, can Shazam's total worldwide gross get more money than what Captain Marvel got in its opening weekend for its worldwide figures? So Captain Marvel got a $456.7 million opening weekend, and can Shazam get $456 million in total for all of the months that it's actually in the cinemas for, in the theaters? Now, at that time, it was looking very possible, okay, nothing guaranteed, but it looked very possible that Shazam was looking at somewhere north of a $500,000 box office. That's not really going to happen at all unless something extraordinary happens. After the second week, you're probably lucky to double your money. Okay, you have to have a film that has a abnormal box office run. That is, it probably had some sort of weak opening weekend, and then it's built up steam afterwards. So to double your money after your second week is a very abnormal run, and Shazam doesn't look like that's the kind of run it'll get. So it will not double its money. So if we look at what it has right now, it has $263 million. Now, that's not the total for the week, but that's fairly close. It'll be hard to think it will get a lot more, so let's say $20 million more than that if the international money comes in late. So, roughly speaking, it's probably going to get less than $280 million for week number 2 all up. So if we double the $280 million, we get about $560 million. That is more, but that's if Shazam has this sort of extraordinarily doubling of the amount of money. 1.5 times is probably something that a film with fairly good legs will do. So if we take 1.5 times the $280 million, which it might get at the end of the week, we get around about $420 million, which is less than the total weekend opening money for Captain Marvel. So I wouldn't say at this stage Shazam looks like it would earn 1.5 times what its second week total would be. And so I would say that it's very, very, very improbable that Shazam will earn more money in its entire run than what Captain Marvel earned in 3 days. Another thing we could maybe look at that might be somewhat possible is, can Shazam's total US domestic box office run earned more money than Captain Marvel's US opening. Okay, so Captain Marvel's worldwide opening was the 6th best in history without inflation. It's about number 8 with inflation. But Captain Marvel's US domestic opening wasn't anywhere near as good as number 6. Okay, we can see on Box Office Mojo it's number 28. Still very good, but obviously not number 6. So can Shazam earn more than $154.7 million in its entire US domestic run, which is more money than what Captain Marvel earned in 3 days in its US domestic run? So again, it would be very, very, very abnormal for it to double the amount of money. It's going to have somewhere, as I said, in the neighborhood of $104 million at the end of the week. Let's just call it $100 million. So to get $200 million domestically for Shazam, I don't think that's remotely possible. If it's got pretty good legs, it'll be about 1.5 times. So that would bring it to somewhere in the neighborhood of $150 million. Now, I don't think at the way it's running right now, it'll go quite that well. But if we add back on the sort of $4 million, $104 million, and that gives us a little bit more wiggle room, another $4 million. If you take another 50% of that, you get $6 million. It's getting a little bit closer. I wouldn't say that it can do it at this stage, but it is a interesting thing to keep track of. And because it's using US domestic numbers, we can actually do a day-by-day comparison instead of sort of getting lumps of money coming in internationally. So can Shazam earn more money in its complete US domestic run than what Captain Marvel earned in 3 days? I would say no right now, but it's something maybe to keep an eye on. Maybe Shazam can earn $154 million in the US domestic market. I don't think it'll be drastically off that at this stage, but with Endgame coming out, it's not even a case of, is Endgame going to be so popular no one wants to see Shazam? That's part of it. Is there going to be enough screens that cinemas can be bothered putting Shazam on? Okay, all the screens are getting sucked up for Endgame. So it's not really a case of how popular will Shazam be next week. It's will there even be sessions running so that if you rock up and say, I want to see Shazam, you don't have to wait 5 hours or something for a session to start. So that's what I think will hurt a lot of the movies. Not just that Endgame's very popular, but the screens just won't be there anymore. But we'll see what happens, and we'll certainly be seeing what happens for Endgame's open. Can it break $1 billion for its worldwide opening weekend? We'll see if it can do that and smash the current record. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.